With the power to bring people together or just help us escape the world, gaming is more than just a game. So join me, Ziggy Chris, as I speak to developers, content creators, and gamers like you and me to discover how each of us was saved by gaming. Welcome in everyone to Saved by Gaming. As always, I am Ziggy Chris, and today we're joined by SightlessKombat, a gamer, streamer, and accessibility consultant who plays, as the name suggests, without sight. From epic battles to breaking barriers, he's proving that gaming is for everyone. So let's dive into their gaming journey and welcome in SK. Welcome.
Thank you, Chris. Oh my word. That is a heck of an intro. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Most welcome. Obviously, I was thrilled to reach out to you, like I am to all the guests I have on the show. That's probably a very stereotypical thing to say. But we are Saved by Gaming, and part of when everyone comes in, we discuss how much games have impacted your life and how much they get us through tough times and this kind of thing. And for anyone listening, you are, I believe, is it correct you're sightless from birth, just to clarify?
Yeah, I have never had any sight whatsoever. That's why I use the term gamer without sight, because legal blindness, often just shortened to being blind, often does include usable and or residual vision, which I've never had. So it's basically a way of saying to people, I have no sight whatsoever.
So I guess one of the most obvious questions then for people who can't relate to that in any form is, how did you get into gaming in the first place as a youngster? Where did this begin for you in terms, because it's quite the path you've gone on in terms of a gaming journey. And before we dive into the things like the games you play now and accessibility consultancy and all this kind of thing, like where did you discover that actually this was something that you wanted to, that you could enjoy?
Yeah, no, I totally get what you mean. I've been playing games for as long as I can remember, or arguably even longer than I can remember, it feels. It really started out on PC with games like Fighter Pilot, which I later found out was an EA budget title, so I got into the EA ecosystem really early. Which I think, looking back on it now, is funny. But it was just through relatives handing me a game and just being like, this. And I'd be like, okay, that sounds cool. I didn't understand how tech really worked at the time at all, because I was really quite young then. But it was still a matter of, I would press buttons and interesting things would happen. Had no idea what was going on, how I was impacting it, but things sounded cool. The music was good. And I probably had more post-mission debriefs where the sort of vehicles and planes and things ended up not existing, shall we say, than actually succeeding at the mission. But then my journey transformed, really, because I was introduced to audio games, as they are shorthanded to, or audio-only games, really. They're primarily based on sound. They'll have rudimentary graphics sometimes, but that's a relative rarity. And they're often made with people who have no sight at all, or very low vision, or low vision of some degree, in mind. And this was in the early 2000s, so I was introduced to a fantastically cheesy game called Grizzly Gulch Western Extravaganza.
Confess that one passed me by.
I'm not surprised, because it was created by a company who only ever made 2 games. They proposed a sequel to their second one, which never came out.
Okay.
And Grizzly Gulch is one of those interesting ones, because it's now basically a point-and-click adventure in all but format, because it was audio only. You used the arrow keys to move between points of interaction or suggested points of interaction. You'd have the bank, saloon, marshal's office, general store, etc., target range, and all those kind of fun things that you'd see in an Old West town, the eponymous Old West town of Grizzly Gulch. You would press the up arrow to go to these places. You would meet all these ridiculous characters, and you'd learn about gambling, gunfights, and bribery. So all great things to learn about from a very young age.
Indeed.
Which was fascinating.
To backtrack a second on what you said about the earliest times when people first handed you devices, so it was more auditory at that point. It was more just about the noises and the sensory impact of it.
I guess, but to be honest, it's that long ago that I wouldn't be able to say for certain in terms of how it all worked or how it ended up happening.
To be fair, I grew up with the ZX Spectrum, and the loading sound was better than the game itself.
And you'd be with it for longer than most of the games, probably, because the ZX Spectrum took what felt like years to load, but was actually only minutes.
When you're young, it felt like an eternity.
Oh, goodness me. That's almost like loading up a PlayStation 2 match of one of the Mortal Kombat games, or a mission in Urban Rain. You'd be sitting there for ages just waiting for it to load. And then all of a sudden the music kicks in, everything goes ballistic, and you're fighting your way through whatever's in front of you. So it was arguably worth it at that point.
Yeah, some games were worth the wait, some not so much. But yeah. And so you moved on to these kind of audio descriptive
No,
tales, audio games. And then is there certain genres that then became easier for you to digest, or was it
Well,
mainly audio?
well, that's a very good question because actually, for lack of a better word, I transferred again from audio games or audio only games, however you want to look at it, from stuff like Grizzly Gulch, Shades of Doom, which is an audio only shooter in the vein of Doom, actually, hence the name, to games like GMA Tank Commander. From audio only games, I then went to things like the PlayStation 1 because I realized through sort of people just talking to me about it that when you're a sighted person, staring at a black screen with a logo on it is not very fun even for short periods of time, let alone long periods of time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went from these interesting audio only titles that I could play on my own without any assistance whatsoever. I later realized that was very cool, to stuff like Street Fighter EX Plus Alpha, Tekken 3, games like that on the PlayStation, on the original PlayStation. And those were great because I could play those with friends. I wasn't very good, but that wasn't necessarily my fault. If you've ever tried to read a move list in one of these old fighting games, sometimes they will be, or in a fair number of cases, they will just be in symbols. So in the case of Street Fighter EX Plus Alpha, it might be a down arrow, a right arrow, a down arrow, and then like a red foot or a green fist. And it's, what does that mean?
Yeah, because when we obviously, as a sighted person, I'm short-sighted, but otherwise my eyesight's generally pretty good. And you just look at it and you're like, okay, left, left, up, down, whatever it is, circle. But as you've just explained, that's very different for yourself trying to make sense of it.
I had no way to make sense of it without other people. That's the key thing.
Right.
Because these games didn't have all the mod cons, as it were, the modern accessibility features that you love, spoken menus or things like that, then you have to say to somebody, what is this move? How do I do this move? And they're looking at the screen and then looking at you like, I have no idea. I honestly couldn't tell you. So there's a left arrow, a right arrow, and a blue hand. I have no idea what that means. And then you just be like, oh, fine. I'll just go back to mashing buttons and hoping things work. And sometimes they did.
I have a brother who's 7 years older than me, so I was that young kid coming into the room of older kids. And when you're like, I'm there mashing the buttons and whipping all their ass because they are trying to do all the moves, and I'm just like going crazy and somehow beating all of them.
But it's funny though, because looking back, that was the only way you could win in that situation. But now, if I were to face my younger self, I would be very annoyed at me. But it wasn't like I necessarily had a choice. That's the other way to look at it. Because move lists, I didn't know what game facts or game FAQs was or anything like that back then. But if I had, then who knows?
So obviously for some of these games, like you say, you had people, you had friends and so on to help try and describe things or play with. But were there still, you've just explained the difficulty of even just a move list in something like Mortal Kombat, for example. Are there certain genres growing up that you felt you completely alienated, you were alienated from, but then maybe you wanted to try, but it was just not feasible?
I remember discussions of things like World of Warcraft at one point.
Oh gosh,
everybody being like, oh my God, we did this raid, that thing, the other. And I was like, that'd be cool. And then it's like, I can't do any of that. Essentially, it still extends to today. Any game that's discussed, whether it's really popular, whether it's an indie thing, there is a massively high possibility that it will not have the accessibility that I need to even play it. If you take a massive success like Baldur's Gate 3, for example, I would love to play that. And in fact, as of the time of recording, I'm starting my very first playthrough next week. But the only reason I am able to do that is because I've had to get a separate piece of software, paid for, by the way, just to combine two controllers into one so that the game can interpret it correctly and so it doesn't go, oh, you have a second player there, let's get them in as well. And that game is highly praised for how moddable it is, accessible it can be under certain circumstances, but it doesn't have the things that I would need natively to allow me to fully play that on my own. And the same goes for stuff like Fortnite, Call of Duty. Yes, there have been accessibility advancements happening in the past 10 plus years, but the same can't be said across all genres for all levels of sight, let's say.
Yeah.
I'm Accessible Gaming Officer for Royal National Institute of Blind People, RNIB, the UK-based sightless charity. And the thing with that is, it's really interesting to keep reiterating sight loss is a spectrum, because it is. You have different levels of sight. And then people realize just how different it is. If you say, I'm legally blind, people think one thing. If you say, I'm totally blind, people think a different thing. That's why, as I said earlier, I say I'm a gamer without sight, because I hope that will clear it up enough that people get it when they see me play video games. I don't mind answering questions as to how it works or what I'm doing or software, hardware, any of that, intuition, practice, guesswork, myriads workarounds, optical character recognition, all sorts of interesting potential topics for any number of things. But equally, though, there are so many games that I've always wanted to play and just haven't been able to. That's why it's always fun when you see, like, The Last of Us Part 1, the remake that came out. It was really interesting to see so many people just go, this doesn't need to be remade, it looks fine. And I'm like, might look fine, but I can't play it. And so when they said, oh, there's all these accessibility things as a part of it, all the options from part 2 are going to be carried over. Me and a bunch of other people were like, oh my goodness me, I've waited 9 years to play the same game everybody else has been playing, and I finally get to. And I did eventually and beat it completely without assistance on my first playthrough, and then went back and got a little help just to clean up all the collectibles and 100% the game. But it was such a great moment to be able to just say, I've beaten The Last of Us. Finally, I've seen the endings that everybody was raving about. It's so good to be able to say that.
That is awesome. And that's amazing. Although it must be, there's so many things just raced through my head as you were talking, so I'll try and keep up with them all. The one is that in terms of then it must be a difficult time to stay spoiler free. Like you mentioned that several years after. And so you're hoping obviously that you get the accessibility tools to play some of these games, but then hopefully it's not ruined for you in the meantime.
Sometimes you hope it's not ruined. Sometimes you don't really mind because you think you're never going to get to play it. There are certain games where I've wanted to play it and I've had people say, I will play it with you if you get assistance, like Baldur's Gate 3. I've remained comparatively spoiler free. Like I've heard of a few things over the years, but I can't remember them all, which is fine. Speaking of number 3, Gears of War 3, I knew the big thing that happened in that. I think I may have even watched it many years ago, but there's an old adage that I've used alongside fellow gamers without sight and other people as well. It's one thing to watch a game being played, and it's a totally different thing to have controller in hand and witness it as a player directly. So sometimes even if you know in advance, it's not the same as actually being there for it, I guess is the best way I can term it.
Yeah, there's a different, on the one hand, being the one feeling like you're making the decisions and the choices is a massive element, but sometimes experiencing it as almost, I suppose, like an audio drama still can be entertaining.
That's arguably, you could look at it as that's what most games are to me, in a sense.
Yeah.
But except with audio dramas, you don't have really any interface with the world itself. Whereas if you look at stuff like God of War Ragnarok, which with assistance I played through on its hardest difficulty, and I've done it solo on lower ones as well without assistance, just because of some of the optional fights you need extra gear for. But being able to block, parry, dodge, retaliate, know what I'm getting hit by and be like, oh God, that big giant dragon dude just killed me again. It's like, oh God, I should have dodged that. Having that agency, that's why I'm so passionate about this, because I and so many others just want to play the same games as everyone else, and we want that agency. Let's say, I don't know, Grand Theft Auto 6, which has just been delayed to November the 19th next year. Yeah. Let's say it launches with full accessibility that I can drive around, engage with it all, do all the missions. I will gladly sit there and stream that, just causing chaos and being like, okay, let's go to the next mission. Wait a minute, no, there's that guy over there. Let's go and steal his car.
Yeah.
And to be able to have that same level of fun is key.
I'm so glad you hit the word that I was trying to think of in my brain for a while, which was agency. I think that's the key one that I was trying to hit on before about choices, is having that agency to be able to just freely change what you're doing at any moment and make those decisions on the spur of the moment.
Exactly. Yeah, that's definitely where a lot of these discussions end up. Even having let's say, the inventory narrated in Diablo 4, that means I can scroll through, I can see what stats or my different gear has. Yes, it will take me ages, but it'll take a sighted person a while as well. And I can sit there, I can craft a build, I can look up a guide online and be like, I need this and this. And then I ask a friend, can you give me a hand to get through this annoying dungeon, because dungeons don't have enough accessibility as of the time of recording. So sometimes you have to enlist friends to help you. There are people who say sighted assistance is a luxury, and I can understand where they're coming from in the sense of you shouldn't need sighted assistance to play a game. That's the ideal. But unfortunately, sometimes you do. And as much as I dislike sometimes having to get assistance, that sort of camaraderie has also led to some fantastic moments as well.
Yeah. The famous song says we get by with a little help from our friends.
Exactly.
There's no shame in that. And again, I still have to incorporate help like so many people. There's some games that I just really struggle with no matter. But like you say, it's the team play and the camaraderie of doing something together. And like you mentioned about World of Warcraft, and whilst you weren't able to jump on that bandwagon, it's that team thing that was a bit impactful for so many people. And it's the same, really. Whatever the game is, it's just about working together with a group of friends to achieve the task. And those moments that bring you together as a unit are extremely powerful.
Oh, that's why Sea of Thieves is such a big game for me, and it has been that and Gears 5, because they are multiplayer games where in one measure or another I can contribute to, at times, a fully sighted team. But in Gears' case, I can actually have at least a couple of people with no sight on the team as well in horde mode. So we're all running around shooting at virtual enemies, and they're not directly being frustrating to us because it's not I'm fighting a sighted player, it's I'm fighting the computer, and I understand how it's meant to work. We're all communicating. And to be able to then get through entire matches of escape mode where I'm following audio cues to lead me in the right direction. Sometimes I'm running in front of sighted people and just saying, oh, big guy around the corner, I'll push him, I've got him, that's good, he's down, now let's get to the safe room. And that's because I have the information there. But equally, when I'm in Sea of Thieves, I can take different roles. I can steer the ship. I can go on cannons. I can do fishing with help to get into position at times to do. But the fact of the matter is, we are all working very much as a team, but we all have a really good laugh when things go well. We are equally frustrated when things don't go well. And when players come around the corner firing cannons when we've not provoked them, we're just like, oh, come on, not again.
Yeah.
But it's all the same, really, if you look at it broadly, all the same as sighted players go through to a degree, which is, I think, the key thing to look at. There are definitely parallels.
Yeah. And it comes up again a lot on this podcast and with everyone I speak to. It's about the building community and things like whether it's through your streams or just through the games you play privately or both. For all of us, that's a big part of what gaming is, bringing people together.
Yeah.
But even before online play and everything else, obviously gaming sucked you in one way or another quite early on. Through your journey, do you think that games have benefited you at times, whether it's emotionally or mentally? What is it that games bring to you? What's the joy? Has it made a difference on you, do you think?
I would say, without a doubt, without gaming, I wouldn't be, doing what I'm doing now as a job, or in general, I wouldn't be as passionate about it as I am. I don't know what I'd be doing now if it wasn't for games. I'm surrounded by memorabilia. I've gone to so many events. I've met so many people I play with regularly to this day with varying games and varying collaborations, loads of projects, all sorts of things. I've traveled the world. I've been to the US, I've been to Germany, to Paris, to Slovakia, to the Netherlands, all sorts of places. And that's all because of what you could link it back to gaming as a whole. It started off with just PC games where I didn't know what was going on, and evolved from there to where we are now, where we are seeing greater accessibility. That's the other thing as well. Greater accessibility has helped with that too, because I've played against Ken Lobb in Killer Instinct, the reboot, and to be able to say I've played against one of the people responsible for the original Killer Instinct games from the 90s. The fact of the matter is, the fact I was able to do that was thanks to accessibility, partly intent, partly deliberate, and partly by design as well. partly by a feature that I actually gave feedback on to give the idea of to the developers at the time, but also because the sound design was that good. So sometimes it's not, oh, we've added in this option. Sometimes it's our sound design is that good that you can actually do this. But that doesn't work for everybody. But the key thing is, with games like that, with games like God of War, with games like Horizon, I will pick up on information that most people might not. I can then say, oh, did you hear this? Did you hear that? There's this noise. And sometimes that will influence how people play. So the impact isn't just the gaming's had an impact on me. Then I am able to share that knowledge with other people. I say to people, did you hear that loading sound as that stormtrooper went to fire a blaster at you? And they're like, no. I'm like, listen. And you'll hear the as the enemy goes to fire the blaster at you. That means you can parry in about half a second's time. So it's a ripple effect in a positive way of, I will gladly share what insights I get from my playthroughs, even if it's, oh, if you go down here, you'll get a cool optional boss fight or whatever it is. When I've written guides or information down for people over the years, I helped write a God of War Ragnarok guide because the accessibility didn't reach as far as it could have done, or people wanted it to, myself included, even as somebody who consulted on the game. The fact of the matter is, I have given people access to information and quests that they otherwise wouldn't be able to do alongside the other people who helped me write the guide. We've all contributed to that. And I've had people say, I really found this guide helpful. And to be able to have that impact come back to me and be like, wow, that's really cool to know they did well because of that information, that's a great positive as well.
Yeah, that must be very rewarding. And because you touched on the consultancy stuff there for a second. So while we're on that, what is it exactly so does a game developer, publisher, whatever, come to yourself or people like you and say, could you have a go at this and see what's missing in terms of helping people such as yourself? Can you explain a bit about what you bring, like how does that work, what you bring to these conversations?
Yeah, sometimes that's the way it works. Sometimes I will play a game, give feedback. Sometimes the developers will come to me. Sometimes I will reach out to a developer and say, oh, have you got any upcoming projects? Or what are you working on at the minute? Or I heard you're working on this game. Or is there anything going that you might be interested in my input on? Full disclosure, I am actually an award-winning multi-credited accessibility consultant. To give you an idea, I've worked on stuff like Sea of Thieves, God of War Ragnarok, Gears 5, the Killer Instinct reboot, Star Wars Outlaws, and The Veiled Shadow of the Crown, Stories of Blossom. So a few sort of audio-centric titles as well as the mainstream offerings as well, and that's just to name a few. When I started, consultancy isn't necessarily just games. Sometimes it's things like, if you look at reviews as well, so arguably that kind of is enfolded into the work to an extent. And it was a lot. It was things like, what does this look like? How do you open this? How did you get that out of that box? All these little things where you wouldn't have the answers because they're all so obvious when you can see it.
Yeah.
So I was like, what if I ordered insert product here on Amazon or whatever and got it through and had no sighted help? How would I set this up myself? So how would I set up an Xbox Series X or a PS5 or a new headset or a controller? How would I get on with this game if I played it for the first time on my own? Would I be able to get past the first room, or would I need assistance only later down the line because there's a strange piece of geometry that's really hard to get around? Reviews have come back into that. So when I reviewed the Gears of War 4 Xbox One S limited edition bundle that they did, so like the one with all the cool scratch marks, if you've ever seen it, the sort of tactile red console, very cool piece of kit. I reviewed that, and from what I heard afterwards, that review got sent round to people at Microsoft who worked on it, which was amazing to hear. And I've spoken to people after that, and they've said, oh, I really liked your review. Whether they worked at Xbox or not, that was really cool to hear. And sometimes consultancy or engagements have come out of that. People have said, oh, I read, this from you. I wondered if you'd be interested in talking about X, Y, Z, A, B, and C to us. Sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's presentations as well. I've talked at AXCon, the big digital accessibility conference, a couple of times. I've talked at the Game Accessibility Conference as well in various places, including online moderating a panel. I've spoken at UK-based events as well. I spoke last week in Surrey, as of the time of recording, on a panel on the future of games accessibility. which was very interesting with colleagues and friends from the industry. I attended my first develop this year. I'm giving feedback, giving these reports, doing remote tests and going into studios, doing whatever it is that they want me to do, even if it's just discussing early plans or ideas, concepts, experiences, any of that, if not more. The fact of the matter is, I realized, oh, I am a developer. And then I was like, I couldn't go last year because there was an unfortunate clash of timings, but I went this year and had an absolutely brilliant time, including getting into discussions that have now led me to look at voice acting roles potentially as a future kind of addition. Having done audio description and being a certified audio describer, I even actually described the Watch Dogs Legion tipping point cinematic. That was a lot of fun to do. It's a short film, essentially, if you've not seen it. If you go to the audio described version, I am the voice that you will hear over the top of that describing the visuals, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I bet. No, that's amazing. It is great to hear how many things have come off the back of your input and work. That is all fantastic. You mentioned about specific controllers, for example, for Baldur's Gate, and I think it was linking 2 into 1 or something like that. And so that just made me think, is there any specific tools and things in terms of your setup? So the games themselves have things in, but is there anything specific you use to support you in terms of your tools and your setup?
In terms of, you said about controllers, it's not actually a controller. This is the fun thing. It's actually a piece of software that we're using for Baldur's Gate 3 called Rewast, REWASD. And the interesting thing about that is, at the moment, not the most intuitive piece of software, partly because it relies on elements of images at times. So the unfortunate thing is I have to get whoever's assisting me, so in this case, a sighted person on the other side of the world, to remote into my PC, adjust what they need to adjust, and then we stream.
Wow.
You'll see that if you watch the VOD. I'm sure I'll put it in some kind of highlight format. That's the eventual plan anyway. But if not, you can watch the full thing to hear the process discussed.
I'll try and we can share the links and I'll make sure it's in the description.
That sounds great. But in terms of software and hardware, I don't use much in the way of software and hardware. After all, I don't have a physical disability, which is often the reason you associate with needing hardware and things like that. But I have a small rectangular box in front of me. Yeah. It's got a flat rectangle on one side, and then on the top, it's like a sort of angled, curving surface with 2 standard USB ports at the front. And if I turn it to the back, there's 2 micro ones at the back. One for your platform of choice, so your PlayStation, your Xbox, whatever. And then one for programming it, which is used when you're rigging it up in certain ways, as I would do, to get people's control inputs in from remote locations. So through software like Parsec, which is used for online gaming and work and things, but I've managed to leverage it over the years for remote streaming assistance. That's the issue I think people have when I've discussed my setup. They're like, I've had people say over the years, I really wish you'd stream games with no assistance. And I'm like, I have done that before, but I have less games to play that way. Why shouldn't I be able to enjoy the games I want to enjoy is how I look at it sometimes. And if that's with assistance from people, then so be it, because we are still discussing the accessibility or lack of in whatever game it happens to be. So we'll say, oh, this sound cue is really useful because that means this guy's taking damage, or that means this enemy's got armor again after not having it for a while, or, oh, that's picking up a bottle or a bandage or whatever. This little device, coincidentally, is called the Titan 2 from Console Tuner. Full disclosure, I'm not sponsored by Console Tuner.
It's almost the size of it. From where I am, it looks like the size of a cassette, something like that.
Yeah, roughly. If I put my hand next to it for scale, you'll see the size. You can see it. But yeah,
it's showing my age, referencing a cassette rather than anything else.
No, I mean, it's not a bad reference, though, because it's coming back. But yeah, that's the main piece of hardware I use. In terms of my work generally, though, I do use a braille display as well, which I have actually used to read presentations, read scripts, even read audio description things as well on videos or for line recordings. But those can cost a variety of amounts depending on what one you get. Those are essentially lines of refreshable braille cells that can move up and down with all the little pins to then make the letters and various words. So if I'm reading across here on a single line, you can then tap a button and it will go to the next line. And then you read across, you tap, go to the next line, etc. There are multi-line ones now. I don't have one of those yet, but they are very interesting looking future investments. The Go XLR that I'm using to speak to you now is actually my streaming setup at the moment. And the Go XLR wasn't accessible at launch, unfortunately, but thanks to the very kind community, has become accessible thanks to a little, I think it's just called Go XLR Utility now, but it's a small piece of software that you install, and it allows you to have access to basically a web page that lets you adjust all your settings in a relatively screen reader friendly manner. And it lets you set up your various levels and EQs and effects and things and sound samples and all like behaviors of the various buttons, all kinds of useful elements that you might need for a stream. I use a mechanical keyboard as well, if anyone's curious, because sometimes people are like, do you use a keyboard with Braille on? I'm like, no, because I can touch type and I've been able to for years. But I can understand the question in a way, get the value of the question. And I'm always happy to answer stuff like that. There is no such thing as a silly question.
I totally agree on that one. Just going to say yes again to confirm that.
Just keep saying yes to the idea of no silly questions. But yeah, I mentioned optical character recognition earlier, and there's been interesting developments in that field relatively recently with the rise of AI. And yes, we are going to get onto the topic of AI.
Oh gosh.
Very
Should I cancel the... We'll stop recording now, everyone.
Stop recording now so the AIs don't pick up on it. But essentially, optical character recognition is where... So say I've got a screenshot of, I don't know, God of War's inventory menu, and I'm trying to go through the runic attacks and seeing what one I want. And I know, I can't remember how many there are in the list because there's far too many, and I'm just scrolling down trying to find the right one. Now, with AI, I could do additional things. With standard optical character recognition, you take a picture of the screen, that then runs through a little piece of software and like a recognition engine, and then it will spit out text or what it believes is text. And that text is then read by my screen reader. Essentially, they are pieces of software that when elements are labeled correctly, they can render on-screen controls, buttons, text, and other elements. Like on a web page, let's say, or in a Word document or that kind of thing. When they're labeled correctly, they can be rendered as synthesized speech or in Braille by the screen reader. There are free ones, there are paid ones, there are very expensive ones. I use a thing called NVDA, so non-visual desktop access, which is free and open source. So anybody you can try it if they want to poke about with a screen reader and see what the strange robotic voice is that you sometimes hear on my streams.
Yeah, and if I may, and again, I suppose it's just a natural skill set because you use it inherently. Because I've checked out a couple of your streams before, and I've heard you using what I presume is the screen reader or something to describe what's going on. But I did note, because obviously you digest it so fast, it's quite quick.
Yes.
To my ears, obviously.
To a lot of people's ears.
And so once I clocked it, I did start to pick it up. But obviously to yourself, and I confess on a tangent as well on this note, people, because obviously I sometimes listen to everyone podcasts and audiobooks and things. And Mrs. Iggy, my beloved wife, she listens to podcasts at like ridiculous speeds because she just churns through them while she's doing tasks. And I can't, I have to, we get in the car and it connects to her player automatically and it's so fast. I'm like, honey, you have to turn it down. I just cannot cope. It's almost as fast as some of your stuff was going. And so she's got the skill. I watched your stream and was like, wow, that's super fast. I guess it's inherent, right? Because you use it all the time.
It's a learned skill. Like I've been recently trying to see if I can put it even faster than that, which is quite fun. Because there are people who listen at even faster speeds than me, which might sound hard to believe, but when you've been doing this as long as I have, you will have heard very unusual speeds of screen reader. All the way from the very slow, where things take about 5 minutes to read, to extremely fast, where it sounds like an auctioneer on time speed.
It sounds like they've taken speed, to be honest.
Maybe. But if you want to hear that in action, I did actually put together a YouTube short a few years ago when I was first trying out the format. Video editing with accessibility in mind is a whole other subject, which we won't cover here. But I'd be happy.
We can always do a take two at some point. We can go into other topics.
I would be very much up for that. But I did do a short a few years ago now where I showed off the difference between the speed people think I read at, which is that very slow one again, where everything takes 20 minutes, to the speed I actually read at, which is pretty fast compared to what most people would expect. And that's the fun thing. That's why I always say, when you're making narrated menus and UIs and things like that, user interfaces and stuff, give us adjustable speech rates, please. And don't just make it slow, normal, fast, fastest. give us a number from 1 to 150 or 200 or whatever, and make it a noticeable difference, and make it the same pitch as well. Because there's a funny bug that I can recall from a couple of games where if you turned it up too far, it wouldn't just increase the speed, it would increase the pitch as well. So if you turned it up to the speed you wanted to use it at, it would basically be unintelligible because it was so high pitched.
Wow. Okay. So and this may be something that you do and I'm just not aware of, but do you ever, in terms of streaming your content, and obviously you said you can listen to it quite fast, do you pace it for the audience at times, depending on the game and the mood? Do you think about the pacing of that?
I don't always have my screen reader running through to the audience, as it were, the lovely viewers at home. I don't have it running through to where they can hear it the whole time.
Right.
Sometimes it'll be just the chat that you'll hear. That's happened on occasion. So the chat comes out through a different setup as a part of my chat bot, my stream bot that I use called Firebot. Shout out to that, because that's a very accessible piece of kit. It takes a little while to learn, but once you get your head around it, it usually works pretty well. There is a learning curve though. But the screen reader side of it, if I'm playing, say, Hades 2, and I want to show how the accessibility mods work, I would throw the screen reader over to the audience and I could still hear it as well. And I would, of course, slow it down if people said, can you slow this down? But I don't mind leaving it at full speed for a while, just so the audience are like, ah!
Yeah.
If people tell me they want it slowed down, I will gladly oblige. But equally, if they don't mind, I'll just leave it. That's the key thing. Tell me if levels and things aren't working properly, if you need me to slow things down, or if you need like a subtitles on or colorblind modes or whatever. Tell me and I will sort it out. If I don't know, then I can't adjust it.
Yeah. And I was thinking partly as well, just from a mood or a cinematic or an atmospheric perspective, in terms of whether that's your personal software, whether it's accessibility options in the game, whether some things that have the option to read at a certain pace, whether it also is to match the mood
of, I think. It's not really a thing that comes up, because audio description, when it's done well, is usually recorded by a human narrator and written by humans, and it's all paced really well. If you want to look at that, look at Spider-Man 2. I've got highlights from that on my Twitch channel. That was great fun, being able to play through that entire game with relatively little assistance. I had minimal assistance for that, and it was so good. I haven't 100%ed it yet, but that's a different discussion. But the point being, the AD is part of the game itself, and it's all recorded to match everything. So it's describing those visuals at the right times, with the right pacing, with the right mood, as you put it, the right emotional weight, I guess.
Yeah.
Whereas menus and user interfaces don't often have to deal with that. So they can either read at a mile a minute and they will be fine either way. You don't end up slowing the screen reader down to just fit the mood, because you just want to have the information.
Yep.
Which is where human voiced games, things like Disco Elysium, which recently just got an accessibility mod, actually.
I saw, yeah.
Speaking of games that I've wanted to play or was interested to play and then couldn't, Disco was one of those ones, came on my radar, and I was like, this is cool, this looks interesting, no idea what it is, everybody's raving about it. Probably never going to get to play it, though, until very recently, when somebody was like, I've made a mod with the help of AI for Disco Elysium, and we were like, oh my word. And then the same developer turned around and said, I've also started on a mod for Final Fantasy VI. And it was like,
wow.
What? And then, to top it all off, the individual in question goes and says, oh, and about that, there's also a mod in the works for Final Fantasy IX. And these are all like AI assisted to varying degrees. And I've got so interested in this idea that I'm actually looking at seeing whether I can put anything together using sort of an AI modding setup. Because there are games that I would love to put together mods for, which I don't have the skills at present to do any of that, but I would love to learn, and maybe seeing how AI does it could be a useful starting point, as well as, of course, looking through actual materials as well. But if it's a game that's already produced and it needs to be, I don't know, stripped down to whatever level it needs to be, I might not have the skills to do that, but other tech might be able to help. There's definitely a sense of tech is really helping there. But in terms of moods and things, going back to what you said before, it's usually just, if you're voice acting stuff, that's all paced out. If you're not voice acting stuff, read it at whatever pace you want. So like visual novels and things, you can just scroll through, just whoosh, whoosh, over, gone, page, next thing. And that's fine. That's okay. But if people were listening to it with me, so let's say I was broadcasting the screen reader through the stream, then I might slow it down to let people process it, because I completely understand that the speed I listen at isn't the speed that everybody listens at.
Yeah, no, it's all good. And like you said, there's no silly questions. So I was just curious if that was a thing at all.
No, it's a completely valid question to ask, given the speed difference and how voicing can impact pacing and how things land as well.
Through your experiences, though, are there specific games that have felt like a lifeline or escape when you've needed it most? Which games have been most important to you through your journey so far?
Oh, that is a tough question.
You've mentioned a couple, which I'm pretty sure will come up again.
Yeah. Throughout, let's say, world events of 5 years ago, let's call it, basically any and all games were helpful then, because I was playing alongside people remotely. I was getting into games with people locally as well, like within the same household, of course, because that's what you had to do back then. And that was fine. That was great to be able to have that distraction. Having games like Last of Us Part 2 launch when it did, I think helped to an extent, because that was a game I spent 37 hours in my first playthrough of Us Part 2.
Wow.
And you know what the funny thing is? My second playthrough took me 27 hours, partly because I knew what I was doing, and partly because I skipped all the cutscenes. Of course, I'm reviewing these games as well. So I'm playing through a lot of it. I'm analysing it all. I'm trying to assess how good it is, whether there's any flaws in systems, that kind of thing. And I'm writing all this up and putting it out there so that other people know, oh, I can purchase this game, or Doom Eternal is great. It sounds great, but it doesn't have this thing, that thing, the other thing. For instance, I'm not trying to throw shade at Doom Eternal. Massive Doom fan as I am, amongst other things. But yeah, games like that, even games like Horizon Forbidden West, or Horizon Zero Dawn even, I streamed Horizon Zero Dawn for the first time during all of that happening. But it was great to be able to play games like that, play games like Dead Space, the original Dead Space, that is, before the remake came out. Dead Space 2 as well I did, which was great fun. I don't mind being scared by a video game. So if I go around a corner and I hear a funny noise, I'm like, oh God, what's that rather thing? Where did you come from? Plasma cutter in the face of the nearest necromorph kind of thing. And that, as much as it might sound like a lot in terms of I had to organize with people to see who I could collaborate with, I only met the person I streamed Horizon Zero Dawn with, or I streamed Horizon Zero Dawn with, I only met them after 5 years of collaborating, i.e. earlier this year. And that was amazing, just to be able to be like, hey, we've streamed all of these other games, so Resident Evil Village, Control, Jedi Fallen Order, Jedi Survivor, all sorts of games. The point being, there are so many games that I got to play that sort of, it wasn't like I needed an escape consciously necessarily, but we all did. And I think that helped. The fact that I was playing games that I wanted to play with people who were kind enough to help me and who wanted to as well. It wasn't just, oh, I feel sorry for you. It was like, yeah, I'll play alongside you and we'll go and both fight robot dinosaurs with a bow and arrow or whatever. Or we'll go and wander around a gloomy, scary spaceship for several hours. And that's the thing. Or like Ratchet and Clank as well. When games like that came out, those were hugely interesting to people. And I was able to be sort of a part of that. I think that's the real crux of it. When I'm able to be a part of the cultural milestones, doesn't matter if it's like Balatro or if it's Elden Ring or whatever. If I'm able to be a part of that, whether that's ideally, of course, on my own terms with no assistance needed. So like A Last of Us, a God of War Ragnarok, whatever, Stories of Blossom, The Veil, even if they're audio-only games, that doesn't diminish how good they are necessarily. If they are good games, that won't diminish it. And if I'm able to be a part of that, then that is the key. Because when you're not able to be a part of that, there's a great saying, if you don't intentionally include, you unintentionally exclude. I've always rather liked that.
Yeah, that's nice.
And of course, there's the whole nothing about us without us thing, which is used normally to apply to working with consultants or subject matter experts or SMEs, that kind of thing. people like myself or any of the other great accessibility professionals that I've worked with or talked to over the years, even though Nothing About Us Without Us is primarily for that purpose, I think it also really applies to including people in gaming. I participated in a few tabletop RPGs over the past few years, and those aren't video games, but that doesn't matter. The point is, I was able to play as a house cat in an RPG. And if you're wondering what the game is, it's Cat RPG, simple as that.
Cat RPG.
It's a fantastic game. It's brilliantly fun. Playing a cat who sounded like he came straight out of Call of Duty. Or Aliens RPG. Massive fan of the Alien or Aliens franchise, depending on how you want to look at it. And I've never been able to play a video game in that genre. Alien Isolation, it's phenomenal. The sound design's great, but I would have no idea where to go and would be lost in the first room. But being able to role play in the Aliens universe and be able to run around with a smart gun, fight off a xenomorph, die at the very end as my fellow character makes it out alive, and then I believe ended up on board a ship with even more aliens.
I've played some of that. I get it.
And that's the thing. Like, the thing was, I was able to be a part of that, and that had such a great impact because I've been thinking since then, I don't know how I would do it, but I want to run my own TTRPG. I want to try my hand at it. And I'm currently chatting to a colleague and friend in the industry who's run their own TTRPGs. And I said, look, could I possibly collaborate with you with the resources you already have? You've already created resources for an RPG, and you could shadow me to do a run. It doesn't have to be on stream or anything. It could just be an off-stream sort of practice run. Being able to collaborate with that, I think that's the big thing. It doesn't matter what the game is. As long as you're able to feel included, feel involved, feel like you're welcome as well as a part of the community, and that people, if they can ask you questions about how you play, about what you want to get out of the game, that kind of stuff, and they don't feel embarrassed about it. That's why I break the ice by saying I have no say whatsoever, or even just with little puns and jokes as we go. Whereas I'll say to whoever's playing alongside me, did you see that? And they're like, no, what was it? And I'm like, I didn't either, so that makes two of us. And I know not everybody appreciates that necessarily, or everybody is comfortable with that. But I do say to people, look, if just to make you aware, I don't mind having, within reason, having those jokes about my lack of sight being said around me. I've got no issue with that. I understand there are people who get on edge about it. And if there were people in my stream or whatever who were like that, then I would accommodate where I could. But it's all about the impact. Games being impactful doesn't just extend to, oh, the game had an impact on me, it gave me a sense of escape. I don't want to think about how many hours I spent in God of War Ragnarok. I really don't. It's far too many. In a good way, of course, doing multiple playthroughs and having a lot of fun with optional boss fights and things like that and enjoying it. But it's not just about me having an escape or anything like that. It's really about how far-reaching games are. Even if it's like with TV shows or adaptations or whatever. Look at Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves. The fact that I was able to access this film because of the AD, and I hadn't played any D&D, but I knew enough from just absorption over the years. And I was like, I get some of these references. I couldn't tell you them all, but I was like, I get this, that, the other. Is that a thing that they have in this? And yep, it is.
It's part of popular culture now, isn't it?
And that's the thing. When games, even if games aren't a part of popular culture, they might be. So it's better to be able to be involved. Like Balatro, it just exploded, didn't it? In the best way. It was just like, oh my goodness me, this tiny indie card game just... And I was able to be a part of that thanks to an accessibility mod. That's why it had an impact. This game is a thing that I could engage with, I could involve myself with, I could enjoy on my own terms with other people, however I wanted to enjoy it. I could be a part of that. And that's when I think things have an impact. When it can be a part of other people's enjoyment, other people's lives, other people's experiences. They'll all get different things out of it. I will get different things out of it to you. You will get different things out of it to somebody else. But the fact of the matter is, it's that first step of being able to be a part of that game's story, journey, whatever, in the first place. I think that's the key contact point, as it were, the key milestone, really, that needs to be considered.
Yeah, that it's perfectly said. So, as we move into our last questions, though, because that was perfectly put in terms of just connecting with people and being part of the zeitgeist, if you like. A couple of fun things I always ask people as we get towards the end. One is, let's give you a gaming doctor certificate for a moment. You are the gaming doctor. If you could give someone a gaming prescription for a game to make them feel good, get them through tough times, however you want to prescribe that, what games would you recommend to someone?
That's an interesting one, because of course it depends on whether people have assistance, whether people don't have assistance. If we're going for one, let's go for just those two permutations. So if we're going for one where you've got people who are willing to assist you, I would either say Sea of Thieves or Gears 5 if you enjoy a frantic, admittedly violent multiplayer shooter where you are all fighting as a team. That can be very good fun. Whereas if you want something that is at times a little more chill, but you are at the mercy of your crew, but you will bond over that in time, Sea of Thieves is definitely the way to go, because there is so much content there. But I think the game I'm thinking of that springs to mind easiest at the moment is actually a game that's not even out yet as of the time of me. It's a game called Rhythm Doctor, ironically, given the brief that you just set me. And that's interesting because it's, to my understanding, it is fully accessible without the need for assistance. And it's got some pretty emotional elements to it, but it is also a very wacky, strange game in the best way. And there are accessibility options, not just for having no sight, but there are accessibility options for if you have trouble hitting notes, if you have trouble seeing the notes, for note speed, all sorts of permutations and interesting options tucked away in the menus. And I've seen this game grow in terms of early access. And there is a good story there, but there is also a matter of you can then go back and 100% everything in theory. And it's, if you want a musical kind of challenge, being a musician myself, having written a lot of stuff for my streams, I've written all the intro, outro, and break music over the years for my streams starting about 5 or so years ago. If you're curious, if anyone wants to see that, I do music streams as well occasionally. But being a musician, it's great fun to see people try and tackle it when they might be out of practice or they really want to try for it and they want to push themselves. There's a couple of different speeds. I put it up to the highest. I was like, how hard is this going to be? I was like, oh God, okay, these notes are flying at me. This is a challenge, but it's good fun. And I think that's the way to describe that game. If you want a game to concentrate on for a while, play in short bursts and come back to, but also with a very good sort of emotional story about people coming together, helping each other through, that kind of stuff, that can help. I'm not saying it's all as positive as that. Sometimes there are darker edges to it to an extent, but it's relatively positive, I would say, at least from the memories I have of playing it when I first started it. But it knows where the feels are and it knows how to target those when it wants to, but in a good way, if that makes sense. So,
no, that's great. I like the fact that you gave us choices for accessibility or not.
If I may, just one final one for the second one.
Cheeky, but I'll take it.
It only makes it fair, right? Balanced.
yeah.
If you want a very much cozy, not time-based game as well, and you're feeling in that kind of cute, sort of nostalgic mood, I guess, to an extent, Stories of Blossom. I am a little biased because I worked on it, but it is a point-and-click adventure game. So very much in the tradition of you grab an item, you use it with a different item or a person or whatever. And it's got audio-described cutscenes. I believe there's graphics as well. But it's all very well put together by a small team who clearly put a lot of passion and effort into it to make it what it was. So if you want something that isn't, oh God, what are all these notes? How do I get through this? And you just want to sit down and play through a few stories, maybe try and figure out what the heck all those achievements are, and just relax even with just the ambience, because the ambient sound design is quite nice as well. Then Stories of Blossom, you can't really go wrong with.
I'm going to have to check that out because I've missed that, but I love a good point-and-click adventure. Grim Fandango is one of my all-time favourite games.
Oh, wow.
So
the puzzle with the tree, the mechanic, the strange... I remember vaguely hearing about Grim Fandango over the years.
Yeah, it's such a Great story. But, and a couple of quick fires. So you may have answered this or not, but one of mine is, so game that feels like a warm hug to you?
Under the right circumstances, that can be Sea of Thieves. Or heck,
Yeah.
even God of War, where you stand with God of War, you block, you parry, you retaliate. And if you've played the game as many times as I have, basically what's coming anyway.
There you go. And again, you maybe the same answers, but game you've put the most hours into?
Ooh, now that might be Gears 5 at this point, or I'm not sure. I'd have to look at the hours on this, but it could have been Killer Instinct at one point, the reboot. I
Right.
played so many hours in that because it was a fully accessible fighting game, great sound design, and I had a few friends who I played very regularly with and would get equally absolutely thrashed and give as good as I got in return with that for many hours late into the night and early into the morning at times. Yeah, very fond memories of that game.
That's, yeah, good names. And so this is not a quick fire, but just to round off, because it's one that I should have asked earlier. But if you could change one thing about how the industry approaches accessibility, what would it be?
That is a big question, but I will try and give as basic an answer as I can, as simplistic an answer as I can. Implement it as early as possible and keep iterating on it. Use all the talent that's there, all the knowledge that is around, the people that will gladly help you if you just reach out and ask. Use all of that to your advantage and work from what other people have done and surpass those bars that they set whenever they released. So don't just treat it as, we want to be the next, I don't know, Last of Us Part 2 or whatever, Sea of Thieves. Don't just say that. Say, we want to be even better than that. We really appreciate what they're doing, and they're really good in their own way for their time, for what they've done. But we want to strive even further because that's how innovation happens.
Yeah, I love that. For those that can't tell, I points during that sentence, I was nodding emphatically. And all right, so I think we've covered so much today, and I feel like I could chat to you for much longer because there's so many things that we could, I'm sure, wax lyrical on. And so maybe there will be call for a part 2 at some point if we can go on to all the things that I didn't get a chance to cover.
Sounds good. I'm up for that.
And so, SK, thank you so much for joining me today.
No, thank you, Ziggy. Really
You're
good
welcome.
to be able to be a part of this.
The final question before we depart, everyone, is that not forever. No, I made that sound definite. Is that I always ask people as well, if there was anyone else's Saved by Gaming story you could hear, who would that be? It could be someone you know. It could be someone you've never met.
Oh, that's a very interesting one. I hadn't expected that as a question. It would be interesting to hear from creators who may have encountered accessibility. So developers who might have encountered accessibility later and had an encounter with a game where they've realized the importance of it. I'm not sure who that would be, but I'm sure there are people out there who've suddenly seen a game and been like, oh, wow, that's why accessibility is important. Actually, one person that I would like to see is Tara, who runs the GA Conf, the Game Accessibility Conference. And Tara and I have worked together over many years. She used to work at Xbox and now works at Netflix and is fantastic. I'm sure she'd have some absolutely phenomenal stories. I don't doubt that.
There you go. That's a great one. All right. We're going to make sure, I will make sure that all of SK's links and things are in the description for this episode as always. And we'll try and link to any of the videos that we mentioned along this conversation as well, so that we can share the love as best as possible. And so as mentioned, thank you so much, SK, for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Ziggy, for having me. If anybody wants to find me on socials, you can find me as SightlessKombat, SightlessKombat. If you want to know what RNIB is doing in terms of the gaming space, you can email gaming@rnib.org.uk. You can, of course, search RNIB DFEG in your search engine of choice to find other information as well on various initiatives and things. If you want to contact me, you can do that on Twitch, Blue Sky, various other places as well. That's where you can find me. But if you want to email me as well, you can do so either directly through my website or using hello@sightlesskombat.com as well.
Perfectly done. Just like a pro. And just remember, people, if you enjoyed any of these conversations, don't forget to share it with your friends, comment, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. It really helps the podcast and helps all of us here. And more than anything, occasionally, as much as we all love games, you do need to touch grass. And remember that when you do, people, it's very important to hit save. as always. Okay, so we'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
This show was brought to you by me, Ziggy Chris. So thanks very much for listening. You know how to do podcast things by now, so if you liked this, push the button, tell your friends, do all that jazz, and we'll see you next time. Take care.